Good morning and good afternoon, and welcome to the 16th session in our webinar series on integrating psychological health and safety in the workplace. I just wanted to let you know, we do apologize in advance. We are having a little crackling on the phone, so please bear with us as we work on our little technological issues. Before we start, I just wanted to mention some housekeeping items. So please note the chat box, which can be found on the right of your screen, where you can ask questions or make comments. When asking a question, please make sure you send them to all participants, which can be found in the drop-down menu beneath the chat screen. I also want to mention this webinar is being recorded and it will be archived on the Mental Health Commission's website following the presentation in approximately 2 weeks, and a French version of the slides will also be available. Due to the large number of participants today, you're all on mute to eliminate background noise. So let's get started. My name is Tina Corey, and I'm a program manager on the workplace team with the Mental Health Commission of Canada, and I'll be your host today. I'm joined by Lauren Bernardi, who is a lawyer and human resource advisor with the boutique firm of Bernardi Human Resource Law. She's been assisting organizations in the increasingly complex area of human resource law since 1992. Lauren works extensively in the field of workplace mental health, respect, harassment and violence, including conducting manager and employee training sessions, preparing harassment and code of conduct policies, and investigating and resolving complaints. She's the author of Powerful Employment Policies and has been quoted in national newspapers and has been a guest expert on CBC Radio. Her firm, Bernardi Human Resource Law, was recently selected to participate in the Mental Health Commission of Canada's 3-year case study project as an early adopter of the National Standard for Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace. Welcome, Lauren, and thanks for joining us.
Thank you very much for having me.
Okay. Here's our agenda for today's session. We're going to have a brief overview of the National Standard for Psychological Health and Safety in the Workplace. Then Bernardi Human Resource Law will discuss what motivated them to implement the national standard from a small Canadian business perspective and what they learned so far on their journey. Lauren will provide an overview of the legal case for why organizations should consider adopting the standard, and then we'll answer some of your questions. So why are we focusing on psychological health and safety in the workplace, and what is the national standard? As you may know, workplace mental health problems are one of the most important issues affecting business today. It's an issue that impacts all workplaces, big and small, and it can no longer be ignored. Mental health can be affected by everyday life and stressors, including those experienced in the workplace. Since most adults spend more waking time in the workplace than anywhere else, the workplace can have a significant impact on one's psychological health, for better or for worse. Workplaces can play an essential part in maintaining positive mental health, and therefore employers have the opportunity to influence the health of their workers. Just like physical health and safety, an employee's psychological health and safety should be considered just as important. The Mental Health Commission believes that improving workplace mental health is everyone's business, and everyone has a role to play. We know that a positive and mentally healthy workplace is more productive and better for everyone. So what are the costs of doing nothing? They can include such things such as absenteeism, presenteeism by reduced engagement and lost productivity, also increased disability claims, injuries, grievances and complaints. You can have higher staff turnover. Employees can leave on their own accord or let go because organizations just don't know how to accommodate them properly. And lastly, there are legal implications, and Lauren will discuss this in more detail in her presentation. So what has the Commission done to support employers in creating mentally healthy workplaces? Well, in January 2013, the Commission, along with its partners, CSA and BNQ in Quebec, launched the National Standard of Canada for Psychological Health and Safety, the first of its kind in the world to help workplaces, whether they're private, public, big or small, to understand what actually impacts psychological health and safety in the workplace and how to create and sustain a mentally healthy workplace. The standard is a set of guidelines, tools, and resources, and it will help employers continuously improve their approach to promoting employee psychological health and in preventing psychological harm due to workplace factors for all employees, regardless whether they have a mental illness or not. The standard is voluntary. It's a set of tools, not rules. It also resonates with organizations because it aligns well with existing standards and practices in the workplace. The standard is applicable to any organization, regardless of size or sector, and it's also intended to enable employers and employees to measure their progress year over year. We recognize that every workplace is different, and some workplaces may feel they don't have the resources or expertise to create a mentally healthy workplace. But it's about taking the knowledge in the standard, tailoring it to suit the needs of your work environment, and even small changes or simple actions can make a difference in promoting positive mental health in your workplace. Please note at the bottom of the screen, you'll see the link to the standard. It's available to download for free, and in the annexes, you will find a tool for both small and large organizations. Since the launch of the standard over 2 years ago, more than 23,000 copies of the standard has been downloaded to date. So we also created another resource tool that was recently launched called an implementation guide to help all organizations with a step-by-step guidance for putting the standard into practice. The Mental Health Commission doesn't just want to tell you that the standard works, we also want to show you that it does. So another one of our initiatives in supporting workplace mental health is the case study project, which is documenting how employers from across Canada are implementing the standard. We are following the progress of more than 40 employers of various size and industry sectors over a 3-year period to identify challenges, barriers, and best practices, and the costs and benefits associated with the standard in order to build a strong business case for the adoption of the standard by Canadian employers. Again, we're pleased to have Bernardi Human Resource Law as one of our industry champions in our case study project to speak to you about their journey in implementing the standard. Over to you, Lauren.
Thank you so much. So I'm really excited to have the opportunity to speak to you all about this because this has been a great adventure for us and we're only just beginning. There were a number of things that motivated to do this, so we're going to look at our next slide. But I want to talk to you about what it was that motivated our firm to get involved in this project. We took it on very early into the process for a number of reasons. First of all, we've always believed in maintaining a healthy workplace culture. We've tried to build an environment where people feel respected, where we have fun, where we all work together in a very collaborative way. So it was something that was very important to us to begin with. So in many respects, this was a no-brainer. But there were other reasons why we were driven to do this. One of them is that we do a lot of work in the field of workplace respect. We do harassment investigations, we do sensitivity training and respect training. And one of the things that kept coming up as a theme was the interplay between harassment and mental health. And we could see that there was work that needed to be done. And so that excited us and ignited our curiosity as well. The other thing we wanted to be able to do was to participate in this process so that when it comes time for our clients to be engaged in it, we have a better sense of what is involved. So it has helped to make us better advisors to our clients in this process. And lastly, there is also a personal connection for us. Like so many people, we have friends and family members that have experienced mental health that has affected them in the workplace. And so we were driven from a caring standpoint to help make a difference in workplaces. And so that was a big motivation for us. So all of these things made it very easy for us to put our names forward to participate in this case study, and we are very, very happy that we've done so. In terms of what we've done so far, we are sort of at the beginning of the process, but in 2013, in June 2013, we did a beginning survey, the Guarding Minds at Work survey. And then we did a baseline report. So the baseline report involved myself and the other champion in my workplace sitting down and doing a review. From our perspective, where did we think we sat on the 13 psychosocial factors? And then from there, we did some work in rolling it out with the firm. So I'm going to go into more detail on that in a moment. But in terms of what we've learned throughout this process, I think one of the things is that we've been incredibly proud of where we are. Our current state is good. There's always room for improvement. And some of the areas where we've seen a need to improve, nothing has been terrible, which is great, but some of the ones surprised us. And so that's good because we sometimes operate on a perception that things are a certain way, and it's not until you start to ask the right questions that you're able to determine whether that is in fact a reality. And the beauty of the tools that are available is that it's all done for you. We didn't have to create anything or invent anything. The tools are there that enabled us to figure out what we need to work on and then gave us the tools to do that. So it really provided tremendous guidance to us. So moving to the next slide, just to let you know a little bit about our firm, Bernardi Human Resource Law is very small. There are only 13 of us. And we had a recent growth initiative. So the timing for this project it couldn't have been better. In 2013, our firm doubled in size. So we went from 6 to 12 and now 13, which if you're working in a large organization, adding 6 people may not seem so great. But when you think of it in the context in which we were existing, that was a huge change. And so it couldn't have come at a better time because we had to move in order to accommodate the additional people, which meant a construction project. During the time preceding the move, we were working out of 2 different offices, which created its own set of stressors and strains, and we had to do all of this within a short time frame. And there wasn't any kind of lead up to this. It was a sudden decision to bring some people in, and so nobody got that opportunity to really become adjusted to the idea of the change. We also have very busy practices, and quite frankly, we were in a state of chaos. And so the challenge then became the risk to everyone in the firm's psychological well-being. So then one of the questions we ask is, okay, this is all demonstrating a need for us to look at our psychological well-being in the workplace, but do we really have the time for another project? And so that was one of the considerations. And I think when I talk to other organizations about bringing in this initiative, that's one of the things that comes up. Do we really have the time for this? We have all kinds of other initiatives. This is going to be like every other flavor of the month. We'll do a few things that'll get put on a shelf, and nothing will ever happen again. And I would like to tell you that we've just made it part of everything that we do. And I'll talk to you about that again in a moment. But it doesn't need to be this separate huge project that involves a whole lot of people. It can be some things that you do in small steps. So that has really helped us to thinking of it that way. So let's move on to the next issue, which is the 5 main stages. And certainly, by the way, if you have questions, I'm more than happy to answer them. Normally when I do speaking face-to-face, and I know there are some of you that are online that have been to my programs, I give out chocolate. But I'm not able to do that on the webinar, but I do encourage you to ask some questions. So the case study project, or implementing the psychological standard for workplace, I've mixed up, the voluntary standard for psychological health and safety in the workplace, involves 5 main stages. So the first is commitment and leadership. The second is evaluation and corrective action. The third is implementation. 4th, planning. And 5th, management review. But as I've said, the most important part is to make it part of everything you do. So really what this initiative is about making your workplace healthy. It's not about making your employees healthy. That is often a side benefit. It helps people to cope that have mental health issues, and it also can help prevent mental health issues from arising. But this is more about the workplace in many respects than about your employees. Excuse me. So we have made it part of every decision that we make. For example, when we had to do this move, we designed our offices to make sure that they were helpful to our psychological well-being. We have a lot of light in here. The offices that we chose were very closed off. There were solid doors, solid walls, and not a lot of light getting through. And so we made sure that we brought light in. We did nice tranquil paint colors, and I truly believe each of these things really matters. When we were locating people in their offices, we made decisions based on people's personal styles. I'm an introvert, believe it or not. I do a lot of public speaking, but I'm an introvert, and I like being in a quiet spot. So I located at the back of the office next to the other introvert, and the extroverts are out front. Excuse me, and so that really makes it helpful for us because then we're being accommodated. Our psychological well-being is being recognized in that way. That doesn't require a report or a committee meeting or anything else. It just is that recognition that at each step we're going to acknowledge the need for psychological healthy workplaces. The other thing that we did was when we did our first survey in 2013, we realized that because of this change initiative, we were going to have to provide more information to people. So we made sure that when we made a decision, we were rolling them out to everyone so that people were involved at every step of the way. Again, this isn't having a committee or filing a report or doing anything. It's just thinking at every decision point, are we doing the things that are best to help protect the psychological well-being of our staff? So now let's go through those 5 stages and what we've done in each of those 5 stages. And we still are in the early stages of this process, but we have done quite a bit so far. Partly because I knew I was speaking today, so I wanted to make sure we did some things, but it is driving us to make sure we get this done. So the first step is commitment and leadership, and this was probably the easiest phase for us because we were so eager to get involved. In many organizations, this is a more challenging issue. Sometimes we have HR people that are keen, you get it, you know the benefits, and then you try to sell it to say the CEO or senior management team, and they think it's just another HR fad. And so that becomes a problem. But for us, it was a very simple decision. So our office administrator and myself, we are the 2 key stakeholders that are working on this together, and it has been very informative. So the next stage is the evaluation and corrective action. So the first thing we did was management evaluation, and we have used the tools that are available from the Great West Life Center for Workplace Mental Health. They've got some fabulous tools there. But we did a baseline report, and that's the one I mentioned earlier, where the office manager and I went through and we identified where we thought we had some strengths and weaknesses. Then we did the Guarding Minds at Work survey. Wonderful survey, not long. I think it takes about 10 to 15 minutes to do, and we had absolutely everybody do it. Our score on employee engagement was 100%, which is reflected in the fact that everybody participated. So that was great because it gave us an excellent snapshot. Now, one of the challenges we have is because there were so few people participating in that survey, it would be pretty easy to identify who might be giving certain answers. So, for example, 11 people completed it because my partner and I didn't. 11 people completed it. If one person gives an answer, that's 9%. So if you get 9% on any category, you know it's one person that's saying they're unhappy about something. So the tendency would be to then go around and try and figure out who it is. So to overcome that, we used a third party. We have an HR consultant that we used, and she gathered the information. She obtained it all, and then what we got back was our final benchmarks. So we weren't then drilling down and figuring out who said what. So it really helped, and I think that also helped people feel that they could participate more freely. It was a more comfortable process for that. Now, what you get when you do the Guarding Minds survey is a report that is fabulous. And one of the things it does is it compares your results to the results of an Ipsos Reid survey. And that was very informative. So, for example, I said we got 100% on employee engagement. So when we looked at the national average, it was about 53%. Was seen as a relative strength. So it enabled us to not only look internally at where we were at and look at those 13 psychosocial factors relative to one another, but we were also able to look at where we were in terms of the national average. So if you're using it within your organization, you would get this same report, and it's very helpful. Are we kind of where everybody else is? Are we off base? Are we doing really well? And again, it can help inform what changes you're going to make. Then came some issues on how we implemented. What do we do as a result of learning the information? So we made a number of decisions based on the identified areas for growth. So when we looked at our feedback, it was based on the psychosocial factors, and there were 4 where there were minimal concerns, and everything else was seen as a relative strength. This was tremendously helpful because if we were to just start the process of rolling out the standard without knowing where to begin, it would have felt tremendously overwhelming. Instead, we got this great report that gave us the 4 areas that were slightly lower than the other ones, and we honed in on those. So we worked on making the changes that would be required there. For example, things like organizational culture, workload management, and leadership were some of the ones we decided we needed to work on. So we made some changes internally to how we operate, how we manage the leadership process, and the information that we give to people. We changed our benefit plan. As a small employer, it has been very difficult for us to offer great benefits. Because we doubled to 13, we were able to change the benefits that we offered, and we now include an employee and family assistance program benefit, which for many of you that are online, that's something you've done for a long time, but for us it was new. We also unveiled a positive workplace policy, and we did some positive workplace training. So we did that not too long ago, and that is something that is different than the traditional respect in the workplace training. Excuse me. So traditionally, when I do respect in the workplace training, we're talking about bullying and harassment, the Human Rights Code, and Bill 168. The positive workplace program that we created and rolled out was something that looked at what do we need to do to create an amazing culture. How do we need to drive that? And it talked about things like releasing resentment from each other, what are some of the negative things that people do at work. And one of the neat things we did was we identified some of the things people do at work, not to each other here, but just in general, passive-aggressive behaviors, gossip, negativity. We had a long list. And then we each privately wrote down on little slips of paper which of those things we've done. And we've all done them. I've done them. And then we walked over to the shredder and quietly shredded them, with the idea being we're going to commit to doing something different in the future. So it was trying to affect a change. And you can do the same thing with having people think about other people that have upset them at work, and they can simply then write down those names secretly again and go shred it. I'm releasing my resentment. I'm moving forward. So that was something that was very important for us to do. We also had mental health awareness training for all of the lawyers, and we need to do this again because we've added additional lawyers. But that enabled each of us to understand how to have the conversation about mental health issues, how to notice when maybe there's a problem, and what are some of the things that we could do to help. So this helped us not only internally, but then again as lawyers for how we can help other people. So what can we do to identify with clients when there might be a mental health issue at play? So these are some of the things that we did. And one thing that we did, I've always said I don't like meetings, and I have kind of a no meeting policy, but we have implemented more meetings because there are times when you need them. And as we've grown, it's become harder to do it organically. It used to be before I could just walk down the hall and tell people what I was thinking. But now with so many of us, it's made it harder. So we have started to have more meetings. The next thing in the 5 stages is the planning stage, and that involves setting your goals for the coming year, and that can involve different levels within your organization. Because we've just completed the benchmarking process, we haven't set our goals for the coming year other than to know we need to do some mental health training with the additional people that have been added here. So I think there's some education that we are planning to roll out, plus also seeing the impact of the things that we have done. So we've made some changes. We now need to live those changes in order to see if they've been effective. Next is the management review. So our intention is to repeat the survey again in 6 to 12 months. One of the challenges of the Guarding Minds survey, of any survey, is that it's a snapshot at that particular time. We did it in mid-December. Middle of chaos, everybody's getting ready for the holiday season, there was a lot of work going on, and so that's going to impact how we feel about our jobs, about our lives, and that will impact your report. If we do it in June or July, we may get a different answer. So we can't consider any one survey to be an absolute measure, but if we do more surveys, then it will give us a greater sense as to where our relative strengths and weaknesses are. So that's just a snapshot of what we've done, and we've been very excited about doing it, and it has really helped us tremendously already. But I'm also a lawyer that works in this area, and I do a lot of employment law work and a lot of human rights work. And so one of the things I thought would be helpful would be to talk about it from a legal perspective. What are some of the reasons why employers should get involved in doing this, and is there a legal case for it? So as you heard already, this isn't law, and there's no intention at the moment to make this law. So if you don't adopt the standard, there isn't going to be anyone coming and saying, well, hang on a minute, you've violated some legal provision or some legal requirement. I am curious to see how this will affect the legal landscape in the sense that will courts say, you as an employer didn't do any of this work, and now you've got situations where somebody isn't being properly accommodated or there's harassment in the workplace, and so you've therefore failed to do what you should, and it may create some liability. I don't know if that's the direction we will head in, but it will be very curious to see, I will be very curious to see if that happens as we get traction on these issues. So let's look at workplace harassment. As I mentioned earlier, there is an absolute interplay between mental health and workplace harassment. And this can happen in a couple of ways. The first way is kind of the obvious way, which is when you're being harassed, it affects your mental health. But it also affects the mental well-being of everyone around the individual that's being harassed. And quite often where you see bullying and harassment, you end up with that entire team that becomes dysfunctional, where there is a breakdown. You have little factions, you have little wars going on, and so soon everybody's psychological well-being is compromised. And so when you look at implementing the standard, one of the things that it does is helps you to prevent workplace harassment, and it gives you the tools for dealing with it, for doing like we did, which is to create the positive workplace policies and things like that. These are some of the things that you can do, and they're tremendously valuable. The other thing that I sometimes see is that the stigma around mental health can cause people with mental health issues to become harassed. For example, sometimes people aren't always aware that depression can manifest in a couple of ways. It can manifest as sadness or a low affect, but it can also manifest as somebody who's irritable. And so if somebody's irritable at work, we might say that person's harassing us. When maybe they're not harassing you, maybe they have a mental health issue that needs to be recognized. Another situation I have dealt with is one in particular where somebody had engaged in behavior at work that was not that problematic, but there was an issue. And so I went in to do an investigation, and I was speaking to the manager. And the manager said he was never going to be alone with that person again. Now, this was not an issue where there was any violence. There wasn't even any harassment, somebody that had gotten slightly agitated. And I said, I don't understand. Why? Have there ever been any episodes of violence? And he said, nope, but with diseases of the mind, you can never be too sure. So this was fairly recent. So this tells us that there's still this stigma out there. We all know that there's still this stigma out there. And that's creating a pressure cooker where somebody's likely to either be discriminated against or harassed because of this misunderstanding around workplace or mental health. So that's one thing that we need to really take a look at in terms of how we're managing harassment cases and who really is the harasser or the victim in those types of situations. Next, we have the duty to accommodate. And obviously, we need to accommodate mental disabilities in the workplace. It is seen as being on a par to physical disabilities. They're both the same in the eyes of human rights law. But we have sometimes a misperception that it is harder to accommodate mental health issues. We don't know where to begin. And so we shy away from it. Well, I don't want to have the conversation with the person. I don't want to talk to them about it because I don't really know what to say. Or we think we need to diagnose the person and we want to have a conversation, we want to provide, we think we need to be therapists with them. Nobody's saying that. You look at the duty to accommodate mental health issues the same as you would look at it with respect to physical disabilities. It's just that you may do the accommodation in a different way. So for example, the person may need changes to how information is provided to them. They may need it broken into chunks, might need to be put in writing. They may need to be somebody that requires a quieter work area. A lot of us could use a quieter work area, I'm sure. But these are things that would be simple changes that could be made that can help somebody with their mental health issues. One of the things I sometimes see with the duty to accommodate across the board, not just with mental health issues, is that we get a little too intense in requiring medical evidence. You provide proof that you need this thing or that thing. But sometimes with mental health issues, the person that knows best what the individual needs is the individual themselves, because each illness will come up in different ways. The symptoms may be different. How it affects them may be different. And so a doctor may not be able to say, or a psychologist may not be able to say, these are the things that they need in the workplace. And if you do get that note, it's likely driven from a conversation with the employee as well. So go to them and say, what is it you need? And it may mean that they need something quieter. They may need to be managed in a different way. But also try not to make assumptions. And one of the examples that I read recently was, let's say somebody comes to you and says, I need the corner office. And your automatic assumption is they're saying they need the corner office because they want the corner office. It's the best place. When in fact, if you drill down a little bit, it's because they suffer from seasonal affective disorder and they need the light. Well, you don't necessarily need to give them the corner office, but you could get them the lamp that helps with the lighting issue. So when you just have the conversation, when you ask them why they need these things or why they feel they need them, how they can help them, you may be able to come up with a solution that meets their need that isn't maybe as bad as you thought it was going to be. But we're afraid to have those conversations. And so one of the things that's important to do is to learn how to have that conversation, to be able to say to people, I've noticed that this is happening. How can I support you? And that's really going to be the biggest part of the duty to accommodate. The other thing I quite frequently see is where somebody gets, for example, a discipline notice or a poor performance evaluation, and the next day they file a sick note. And they say, that's it, I'm off sick. Our automatic assumption is that they've gone off sick and they're not really sick. They're just doing it to get away from having to deal with the discipline or whatever else is negative in their work environment. But it may well be that they were just coping. That could be the thing that is causing the performance issues or even the other issues that have led to the discipline. They're just barely hanging on psychologically. And then they get this thing, this negative thing. And now that's it. They can't cope anymore. And so it may be legitimate. It may be that now they're having panic attacks or they're now suffering from anxiety or something has resulted from that. So where you get these situations of having given someone discipline or a bad performance review and the next day you get the note, take it in good